Donald Trump has celebrated the launch of Black History Month as only he can. There's a couple different elements to this we want to get to, but the first is my favorite, perhaps the funniest part of this, is as he goes down the line of, to his credit, honoring some of the African Americans who, through our nation's history, have made the greatest contributions to society, governance, business, and all that. He starts off with one, and the way he describes those contributions is a little odd. Let's see if you can catch it.
Frederick Douglass is an example of somebody who's done an amazing job and is being recognized more and more, I notice. Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and millions more Black Americans who made America what it is today. Big impact. I'm proud to honor this heritage, and we'll be honoring it more and more.
So Frederick Douglass, who you might have heard of in history classes, because he was born, I believe, in 1818, and is not currently operating, has done a great job and is getting more and more recognition.
Yeah.
I've noticed.
No, Frederick Douglass, so hot right now.
So hot right now. I believe he's trending on Twitter, although not for the reasons Trump thinks he should be.
I just love how he's like, I'm hearing more and more about this Frederick Douglass.
Yeah.
That's like me trying to make a sports reference, right?
Exactly.
Where I'm like, I'm in the know.
Yeah.
I know about Mike Trout. He's good.
I've heard about this Hank Aaron. You know, when I go to the water cooler, it's always Hank Aaron talk going on. But anyway, that's the only example I could come up with. Look, maybe it's just weird, a weird way to say it. And we're going to have another quote for you shortly where when you hear him talk, he doesn't talk like a normal human being. It could just be that. But it's a really weird way of putting it. And the defense of why he said what he said is going to be even weirder, perhaps. Here is Sean Spicer.
Frederick Douglass being recognized more and more. Do you have any idea what specifically he was referring to?
Well, I think there's contributions. I think he wants to highlight the contributions that he has made. And I think through a lot of the actions and statements that he's going to make, I think the contributions of Frederick Douglass will become more and more. Kristen.
Yeah, so it's not a non-response, but I love when, first of all, that you have to ask that question. It's funny, and then Sean Spicer's like, he's like taken aback. Oh God, no, not this. Now, the one thing that might make what Donald Trump said a little bit true is that yes, although I guess the biggest amount of publicity that Frederick Douglass got was probably in the 1870s to 90s, like that sort of time when his books were out, he was giving speeches and all that, but for a period, his sort of legacy and history was not being taught as much. One of the things that actually changed that was the launch of Black History Month. And so if you're one of the people whose knee-jerk reaction is, well, why do we need a Black History Month? Where's White History Month? Which we do have. It's January through December. It happens every year. This is one of the products of it, is that we can give extremely shallow overviews of Frederick Douglass and other figures' histories thanks to Black History Month.
You know, you touched on the importance of education and how Black History Month, brings up the contributions of various Black historical figures into American society. But conservatives, for a very long time now, have been fighting against any type of education on any type of civil rights leader or minority leader who's had a profound impact on our political system, on the way that we run things, the way that we react to various groups of people in this country. For years now, the Texas Board of Education has been fighting tooth and nail to get rid of civil rights leaders in social studies books and replace them with right-wing leaders like Phyllis Schlafly and people like that.
Yeah.
I love saying Phyllis Schlafly's last name. And of course, she's uber conservative, wants to outlaw, feminism and abortion and things like that. But nonetheless, that assault on education of not only whitewashes history, we know that takes place, of course, but it gives you less context into our American political system. Without accurate history and accurate historical references, you can't learn from history, which is why we see the same mistakes being made over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's a cycle of ignorance, because the people who oppose the idea of something like a Black History Month or the other equivalents for other groups that aren't typically given their due in our education system would say, what's the point of focusing on this? I know about American history, and honestly, I think it's pretty much just white people that have done all the good stuff. But the reason you think that is because the stories of Black Americans and Americans of other groups aren't being taught. It is ignorance that is leading you to think that their history doesn't need to be taught. And hopefully, if Black History Month even remains through Betsy DeVos's term as head of the Department of Education, future generations might understand the diverse origins of advances in American technology and governance and all of that.
There's just a tone or a cluelessness that comes with everything he's saying. First of all, he had to read a piece of paper that was prepared for him about the names on the paper. And if you can't use those names, the 4 names that he's ever heard of before that are all on that paper, use them for your advantage or for a pass for what you're doing today in current times, then what's the use? Like, you can use Martin Luther King and say, well, Martin Luther King said he had a dream and he had this one dream, and that's the only speech I've ever heard, and only part of the speech I've ever heard is the dream part. And then, he said that one day we're all going to be equal, and that's what I'm still looking for, and that's what I love about Martin Luther King. That's all it's ever said about him. Yeah. So then, he doesn't know anything about Frederick Douglass, so then Frederick Douglass, who I heard is being noticed more and more, because that doesn't apply to anything I can use him for today, and just read off a piece of paper. Him and Spicer, both when they're asked about it, or Trump wasn't asked about it, when you talk about it, they sounded like 4th graders who were called in the middle of history class when they weren't paying attention, and they had to BS through 5 seconds to 10 seconds worth of an answer. And it's grown-ass men.
But let's move on to him acknowledging sort of another important African-American in this video.
Last month we celebrated the life of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., whose incredible example is unique in American history. You read all about Dr. Martin Luther King a week ago when somebody said I took the statue out of my office. And it turned out that was fake news. Fake news. The statue is cherished. It's one of the favorite things and we have some good ones. We have Lincoln, and we have Jefferson, and we have Dr. Martin Luther King, and we have other, but they said the statue, the bust of Dr. Martin Luther King was taken out of the office, and it was never even touched. So I think it was a disgrace, but that's the way the press is. His
normal routine in speaking, something that's prepared, you can tell where he's reading, first of all. Then he diverts to his little asides every time he gets to something that triggers in him. And he was reading, and he got to Martin Luther King Jr. And as he got to that, he remembered, what just happened, Martin Luther King? The bust, and they did me wrong. It's back to him every time.
Exactly.
You know what happened to me in reference to Martin Luther King Jr.? You know what happened to me? You know what they did to me? And it goes back to his fake news, and look what they do to me, and the media is so unfair. And then got back on his prepared messages. Yeah. And every time he gets off, it's about himself. Something triggers in his own brain. It's the me-centered world.
Well, let's do this next clip. You're gonna see he's gonna bring in one of his supporters from the African American community.
Well, this is Black History Month, so this is our little breakfast, our little get-together. Hi, Lynn. How are you?
Hi. How are you, sir?
Nice to see you. And just a few notes. During this month, we honor the tremendous history of the African Americans throughout our country, throughout the world, if you really think about it, right? And their story is one of unimaginable sacrifice, hard work, and faith in America. I've gotten a real glimpse during the campaign. I'd go around with Ben to a lot of different places that I wasn't so familiar with. They're incredible people.
I would like to again give him credit for once talking about meeting with and talking with African Americans and not talking exclusively about the inner city. He got close to saying it there. That's what I think he meant, but he didn't say it. And generally, that's one of the things I think he deserves the most criticism for. If you're trying to get an idea of what he thinks about different communities and what he might do for them, the fact that previously, whenever you ask him about concerns that the African American community has, he will immediately begin talking about the inner city and crime. That's the lens that he sees a group of tens of millions of Americans through. They all live in the inner city. The only thing that worries me regarding them is their crime rate.
If you want to see this happen, donate $3, $20, $27, whatever you can afford. You know that if everybody that's watching this video donated right now, we could stop the fundraising because we'd have enough. So go to TYTnetwork.com/go. We'll wait while you make the donation. Thank you for doing it and for building a great new journalism team. And thanks for watching.